So this is a data set of high school athletes' values that I think we were talking about last week, but I can't completely remember because I was trying to find out what the names of each of the different columns meant. So I couldn't get the MB in, so the medicine ball inchworm. What you've got is the athletes. They're anonymized. They're called 1 to 57. You've got their sports that they practice. You've got their age from 14 to 18 because they're in high school. You've got their height in inches. You've got their weight in pounds. You've got body fat, BMI, how many sit-ups they can do in a minute, their speed, the time for 40-yard dash, vertical jump they can do, their sitting reach, their number of repetitions of a bench press of 60 pounds that they can do before they get tired, the maximum bench press they can do, the leg press they can do, the maximum leg press they can do, the medicine ball inchworm in inches, and their seasonal record for running, I assume 200 yards, bearing in mind the relationship to 40 yards. Now, the reason for collecting this high school athlete data was, I presume these are quite high performance athletes. So what you're going to do, what you need to do is test how well your athletes are performing, and you need to test their strengths, and you need, if they're training, you need to know that your training's working or that you're improving the areas where they need improvement. So if I'm going to measure strength, what I can do is I can measure the maximum amount of weight they can bench press or leg press. Now, is testing something to destruction by getting the maximum amount they can do a good idea? Do I want to get an elite Olympic athlete and keep piling the weights on until I find the point where they can't do it anymore? Or your elite footballers? Why is this not going to be a good idea? Just keep piling the weight on and then until they go, no, I can't do anymore. Injury risk, exactly. It would be catastrophic. You're going, I'm the best trainer in the world. I'm going to get you to be an Olympic gold medaler. Olympic gold medaler. I'm going to get Olympic gold medal for you. And I go, oh, sorry, you got injured in training. In fact, there's nothing worse than that. I can't. There was a rugby team, and their most important player, he got injured in the warm-up just before the match, so they had to replace him with some dregs that happened to be kicking around at the time. So that team naturally didn't have a very good game. You don't want to test to destruction, but you do want to know or have some kind of estimate as to what kind of weight they can do, how really strong they are, because you're doing their training. So in this case, there are certain variables that you expect to be related to each other. So you'd expect the amount of repeats they can do of bench pressing 60 pounds to be related to their maximum bench press. So if these two things are correlated, you can use the BP60 to calculate or estimate the maximum bench press. The same for the leg press, and the same for the 40-yard dash compared to the seasonal record, because you don't want to have the person running around the track trying to get their season's record every single week that you want to do a test. But if you just get them to do a 40-yard dash every week, that's useful. So what we want to do is look and see if these things are correlated. So correlation, the type we want to do is bivariate. You're comparing two variables to one another, and you want to see if they're related. So we're going to do the repetitions for the bench press against the maximum bench press, because we think these two things should be related. Now, correlation can be calculated as either parametric, which is called the Pearson's one, or non-parametric, which is called Spearman. There's another non-parametric which I've never seen used, except probably in very high power statistics terms, which is called Kendall's tau. So we're not going to cover that. I actually was reading the textbook, a standards statistics textbook, and they consider Spearman to be optional. Now, the reason why this idea of normality and non-normality in this sort of data is not often going to occur. So in this case, probably it is normally distributed and Pearson's is fine. But often when you're doing a measure of an x variable against a y variable, you don't randomly pick your x's and y's. You pick them over a range and you pick them at regular intervals over that range. So you pick high values, medium values, and low values of x, and these are going to give you high values, medium values, and low values of y if there's a relationship between them. You don't pick them randomly. In this case, you are going to get them randomly because that's just the nature of these bench press measurements. You've not picked a group of very strong athletes, weaker athletes, and so on. But you can see that everything's recorded, so you can see it on the video, but I'll show it again in a second. Right, so if we go OK, this is the output. So I get two separate well, they're 2x2 matrices, tables. One's correlation, one's the parametric, and the other's non-parametric. So what you've got is repetitions against repetitions has a correlation of 1 because it's the same variable on x and y. So of course it's perfectly correlated. But your correlation between the repetitions and the maximum is 0.802. This is a strong correlation. It's telling you it's significant by putting two little stars above it, and it gives you the p-value for that level of correlation of 0. So there's no chance that this arose accidentally, just purely by random possibility. For the non-parametric, it's slightly lower. Sometimes it's lower, sometimes it's higher. It's very rarely exactly the same, but most of the time the significance will be similar. So if it's found to be significant in one, most of the time it's significant in the other. So what I've done here is compared two things that I wanted, the two bench press. But there are other variables within the table that I thought might be interesting and correlated to each other. So when I go to analyze and I go down to correlate, because I'm doing correlation, go across to bivariate, instead of just putting in those two variables, I can put in all the ones that I think might show some kind of correlations. So I think leg press will match with, where's the other? Maximum leg press. And I think that time for 40-yard dash will also correspond to the seasonal record, because running will correspond to running, except if I'm a different kind of runner. So if you had one of those seasonal, if that seasonal record was for cross country of 15 miles or whatever, I wouldn't expect it to correspond very well with my rushing in my 40-yard run, because that's a different kind of muscle and strength and training. Right, when I press that, then I get these sort of correlations. Now, if I look, I can look either across one or two rows, I can look down the columns, it doesn't matter. You'll see the diagonal is always 1 because it's always this variable compared against itself. It's always going to be 1. Oh, let's stick to the parametrics. So we've seen the 0.802 relationship between bench press and max bench press, but oddly enough, it's also related to leg press and maximum leg press. But the strength between leg press and maximum leg press is 0.793. That's a stronger correlation than the 0.669, which is between bench press and leg press. This is interesting and what you would hope and expect to happen. You would expect that if you've got an athlete and they're doing a reasonable amount of time in the gym working on their bench press, you're also going to get them working on their leg press as well, so they don't end up disproportionate between arms and legs. So you have people who go to the gym have arms day and legs day, but you don't have arms day every day and no legs days. So I saw somebody on holiday who had taken that to that extreme and only ever seemed to have done arms day, and they look like an inverted pyramid. They had these little legs, and then suddenly you got to the top of half of their body and they looked like Arnold Schwarzenegger. It was a bit crazy. Most athletes are not going to do it in that. You want to keep proportion in your muscle build. Now, there's not a significant relationship between your amount you can bench press and how fast you can run, not surprisingly. For either the seasonal record, there's just nothing there. There's a slight negativity for the 40 yards. Now, that, if you look at people who, well, if you've got a shot putter, I can bet that they're not going to beat Usain Bolt at the 100 meters. If you look at most 100 meters runners, though, they are pretty bulky and have quite powerful muscles and do quite a lot of muscle building because it's a power sport. Whereas if you look at a long distance runner, they have a completely different physique. They're very much thinner and they have a different structure to their muscles. You don't hear of that many long distance runners running out and doing anabolic steroids, but you do hear that amongst the 100 meters runners. They're often caught as drug sheets in that way. Long distance running, what you want to do is improve your oxygen levels. So and same in long distance cycling. So they do what's called blood doping. They artificially increase the amount of red blood cells within the body by blood doping, which is why they're always getting penalized in cycling, not so much in long distance running. Right, leg press. There's still maximum leg press. No, there's still no relationship to the running. But if you look at the time for the 40 meters dash, 40-yard dash, it is related to the time for the seasonal running. So times dependent on running are correlated to each other. Measures dependent on muscle are correlated to each other. This is what you expect, and it's a nice result, showing that you sometimes get correlation and sometimes not. If I go down to the non-parametric, I'm pretty sure, yeah, there is one here. So there's a slight relationship between your seasonal record, so that's why it's only got 1 star, and the p-value is 0.041, so it's below 0.05, but only just. So there is a relationship for your 200 meters running and your maximum leg press, which is reasonable. If you've got strong legs, you can probably run. So from this correlation analysis, you can figure out that by using the repetitions of the bench press and of the leg press, you can create a model of the maximum leg press and bench press so that you don't have to test them to destruction.